Peter Schweitzer's on the line with us. He's a fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University and president of the Government Accountability Institute, the author of a new book, Extortion, How Politicians Extract Your Money, Buy Votes, and Line Their Own Pockets. His website, Peter Schweitzer, without a T, Peter, SCHWEIZER, although you pronounce it as if there was a T, .com. Peter, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Tom.
Thanks for joining us. We disagree on a few things politically and worldview-wise, but I think that I think you're onto something really fascinating here about how politicians, we may disagree on why this is, but which is a whole other issue, but how politicians are basically picking our pockets. Lay out your premise for us.
Yeah, well, basically my premise is that, our approach to money in politics for the last 40 years or so has largely been that we've got to protect politicians from outside influences. And I certainly agree with that, but I think it's been exclusively that. My basic premise and belief is that we also have to erect defenses or create reforms that prevent politicians, in a sense, from extorting money. That the problem is not so much just bribery, but it's actually extortion, where they are creating circumstances where they can leverage their position and power that basically compels industries or companies who ordinarily wouldn't give to candidates to feel like they have to.
Give me an example.
Well, an example would be the high-tech industry. This happened to Microsoft in the late 1990s. I think you could argue it happened to Google here more recently. In the high-tech sector, basically, they are focused on innovating. They are focused on, a very, very highly competitive market. Not that they don't care what happens in Washington, they do. But I think there was a pretty concerted effort by politicians from both parties to say, look, you need to be interested in what we're doing. You may not be interested in Washington, but Washington's interested in you. And I even quote in my book a statement from Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah, who said, if you want to go into business, you need to be interested in politics. There are a lot of businessmen who don't agree with that, but basically they're put into a situation where they have to.
Well, here's a chicken and egg situation. I mean, you've got companies like Comcast, the big cable companies, and this is a story you won't hear on MSNBC because they're owned by Comcast. But you've got companies like Comcast that, are pushing for legislation that allows them, since they're one of the largest internet service providers in the country, many people, I don't know if it's most, but many people in this country get their internet service through Comcast, that would allow them to say, okay, we're going to meter your service. We're going to charge, if you're going to have a website on there, if you're going to do commercial activity as opposed to non-commercial activity, we are going to be able to look at what you're doing and charge you based on what you're doing. Right. And, which is even more draconian than the phone company. I mean, the phone company used to say, if you want to call from New York to New Jersey, that doesn't cost you as much as calling from New York to San Francisco. But they never said, if you want to call from New York to New Jersey, well, actually, they did for a while. You used to have to get a business phone if you were a business, and if you had a personal phone, which was cheaper. I remember starting a business back in the 70s and using a personal line and getting busted by the phone company. They said, no, you've got to have a business line. You got to pay extra for that. So, Comcast is trying to do that. They're trying to say, we're going to charge extra for this. And then on the other hand, you've got big businesses like Google and Microsoft who are saying, no, and Amazon.com and whatnot, New York Times, who are saying, wait a minute, we're doing our business on the internet, and a lot of small companies too. We're doing our business on the internet. We don't want to be charged extra just because that happens to be the place we're doing business. So both of them are going to members of Congress and saying, put forward legislation that will protect our interests from the other guy. They each find legislators to buy. The legislators introduce the legislation. From your worldview, the legislators did that from the get-go in order to squeeze money out of these companies, but it seems to me like the companies just as easily could have started this process.
Oh, no, there's no question, Tom. You're right. There are businesses that come all the time that are looking for government to sort of serve their ends. I think the problem is that all the incentives, though, in the case that you just laid out, all the incentives for what I call the political class, and that is people from both political parties, is to drag this thing out. They really don't have a financial incentive to solve this problem because so long as it lingers and festers, they can drag it out, they can continue to extract donations donations, lobbying gigs for family and friends, etc. So yes, there's no question that industries come, they're looking for special favors, they're looking for special benefits. I personally call that crony capitalism, where they're looking for the government basically to do their bidding.
I would agree with that.
Yes, but I think the problem is that they like to pit industries against each other. And as I interviewed a former corporate executive, President of Shell Oil, who said, if you look at the business model of the political class, there's no money to be made in solving problems, because when you solve problems, it's harder to raise money, it's harder to get lobbying contracts for families and friends, et cetera.
Yeah, well, this is one of the complaints that I heard very loudly at a CPAC convention in. It was one of the presidential election years. I think it was 2008, where one of the speakers, who was an anti-abortion speaker, was saying, the Republicans all the time tell us that they're going to outlaw abortion, but then we vote them into office, we give them power, and they don't do it. And I think that they don't do it because they want to continue begging for donations from us anti-abortion Republicans. And that person got a fairly hearty round of applause at CPAC. I mean, I was there in the room when that happened.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, and I think there are lots of people that can say that. Not only that are issue driven, whether it's environmental groups or social conservatives. I think a lot of companies can say that too. I mean, for example, take the tax code. Set aside the policy questions, about some of the tax credits and things that are around there lurking. Something like the research and development tax credit, which has been around since 1981, that the high tech industry uses for renovation and basic research and development. It never gets extended for more than 1 or 2 years. Well, why is that? It's because if they extended it for 10 years, they couldn't go back to those companies and say, hey, we're thinking about doing this, but you better pony up.
Yeah.
So it's this
So what's
model.
the solution, Peter? You've identified a very real problem in my mind, and I've read your book, or at least most of it. It seems to me that the solution is to say that the Supreme Court is wrong and that money is not free speech. You disagree with that. What's your alternative proposal?
Well, I think these guys are pretty clever, unfortunately, and they're always going to find out ways around it. But I think that one of the things we can do, for me, it's not just a question of the money contributions to the politicians. It's a question of the timing of those.
No, but you said this has really been only going on for about 40 years. I mean, that tracks back to the Buckley case when the Supreme Court first said money is speech. Right. And I think, that's a legal question that the lawyers are going to fight out, whether the court was right or wrong. I think that given the situation we're in right now, one reform that we should look at is putting regulations or controls on the ability of politicians to solicit donations. So let's do in Washington what's done in 27 states, including the state of Washington, the state of Florida, the state of Texas, and elsewhere, which is they say that state legislators cannot solicit or receive campaign contributions when the state legislature is in session, period. Were we to do that in Washington, Tom, I can guarantee you two things would happen. Number one, they would be terribly efficient with their time in D.C. because they would be looking to go out and head back to their districts and raise money. So it would force them to stop a lot of the shenanigans that they do right now to gin up the possibility for raising donations. But wouldn't they just create PACs that would do it on their behalf? I mean, wouldn't Karl Rove just start raising the money instead and then passing it out to people he likes?
Yes, they certainly could. I mean, you have the issue that the courts have determined that, individuals, as you said, can and will and are able to, be politically active. So that's always going to be an issue. But I think the more compelling one for me is the actual funding of the candidates themselves, because that's where I think you get into the quid pro quo. When corporations come to guys and say, look, we'll raise you a lot of money, we need you to do us a very particular favor.
I think, Peter, every American would agree with you that we have a serious problem. And your book, Extortion, How Politicians Extract Your Money, Buy Votes, and Line Their Own Pockets, is a great start. You're opening the door. PeterSchweitzer.com. Thank you, Peter, for dropping by.
Thanks so much, Tom. I appreciate it.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
I mean, how we solve that problem, that's another conversation that needs to be had. I think we could go to movetoamend.org, start a local chapter.